philosophical intersection, the concept of the diagram as understood by Charles Sanders Peirce and how Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari appropriated it. Our discussion is based on the article Peirce, Deleuze and Guattari and the Problem of the Diagram in the Philosophy of Difference, from the Roots of Mathematics of the Semiotic Diagram, by Diego Frank Marquez Cavalcante, Flavia Cristina Lemos, and Flavio Luis de Castro Freitas, published in La Deleuziana, Online Journal of Philosophy, N17, 2025. The core argument of this article is that while Deleuze and Guattari adopted Peirce's concept of the diagram, they largely reduced it to an icon of relations within the field of semiotics. However, the authors propose that if we understand the diagram through its deep mathematical roots, it becomes far more productive for a philosophy of difference. For Peirce, mathematics represented the most abstract form of knowledge, serving as the essential foundation for less abstract sciences, including semiotics. The article suggests that this original autopoietic mathematical diagram is implicitly present, providing the abstract and differential basis for constructing diagrammatic icons. The authors point out that Peirce himself considered mathematics the most abstract and hypothetical deductive form of thought, disconnected from empirical reality, an autopoietic power of thinking. Now, let's start by understanding Deleuze and Guattari's philosophy of difference and their inventive approach to concepts. Their philosophy is characterized by its immanence and its strategic alliances with other thinkers, artists, and scientists. They don't engage in mere commentary. Instead, they capture concepts that can function within their own philosophical framework. Thinkers like Nietzsche, Hume, Bergson, Spinoza, Kant, and Foucault were systematically integrated, sometimes even through monographic studies. Peirce, however, falls into a category of more sporadic but still crucial alliances, alongside figures like Duns Scotus, Louis Hjelmslev, Noam Chomsky, Gilbert Simondon, Emmanuel Levinas, and Francisco Varela. The authors note that the Peirce is first cited in Deleuze and Guattari's seminal work, A Thousand Plateaus, in 1980. He also appears in their individual writings, such as Deleuze's books on cinema and Francis Bacon, and Guattari's L'an zero un des machines abstracts, Micropolitica, Inconscioso Mecano, Chaosmosis, and Revolution Molecular. There's an ongoing academic debate about the diagram in Peirce, Deleuze, and Guattari. For example, Gangel in 2015 articulated Peirce, Deleuze, and Spinoza to explore immanence, ontology in the diagram, emphasizing its ontological, expressive, and constructive aspects. Valloti, in 2014, discussed the diagram as a constructivist agent, equating it with the abstract machine. Valloti suggested that for Peirce, the diagram operates within a logical constructivism, while for Deleuze and Guattari, it's ontological, political, and aesthetic. The current article's lead author, Cavalcante, in 2025, highlights the importance of understanding Peirce's systematic and complex philosophical architecture to truly grasp his concept of the diagram. Peirce's philosophy can be summarized into three main branches. Mathematics, for Peirce, is the most abstract and hypothetical deductive form of thought, disconnected from empirical reality. It's an autopoietic power of thinking. Philosophy, then, builds upon mathematical thought, connecting it with everyday observations. Special sciences take philosophical concepts and apply them to specific, delimited fields of observation, requiring specialized experimentation. Within Peirce's philosophy, there are further divisions: phenomenology, normative sciences, and metaphysics. Phenomenology observes phenomena to extract universal categories of appearance. Normative sciences attach purposes to phenomena and include aesthetics, ethics, and semiotics. Aesthetics critiques what is admirable in itself. Ethics associates the admirable with values, and semiotics, or logic, evaluates the reasonable means to achieve ethical and aesthetic ends. Importantly, these normative sciences are subject to perpetual social critique. Semiotics itself is divided into speculative grammar, critical logic, and speculative rhetoric, while metaphysics aims to produce a theory of reality using the normative sciences. According to Cavalcante, during the 1970s and 80s, Peirce's thought was often presented in a fragmented way in Europe, obscuring these architectural relationships. A significant publication was the 1978 French compilation Écrits sur les signes, which was only 278 pages and focused mainly on Peirce's phenomenology and semiotics. Deleuze and Guattari's direct references to Peirce largely stemmed from this limited compilation. Cavalcante suggests that if they had access to Peirce's more extensive works, he might have become a more systematic intercessor for them. This leads to the proposition of a schizosemiotics research program aimed at updating alliances between Peirce, Deleuze, and Guattari to investigate the semiotic traces of desiring production and the very production of difference. The article specifically aims to expand the Peircean concept of the diagram beyond its semiotic application, as captured by Deleuze and Guattari, into Peirce's mathematical context. This expansion would allow the diagram to be seen not merely as a sign of internal correlations, but as an abstract potential for differentiation. The authors argue that Peirce's diagram, rooted in mathematics as an abstract autopoietic space for simulating new ideas, aligns much more closely with Deleuze and Guattari's notion of the abstract machine than with the reductive idea of an icon of relations. Now let's elaborate on Deleuze and Guattari's philosophy of difference and the invention of concepts. Their philosophy is a critique of representation, especially the idea of progressive rationality found in Hegelianism and Platonism, which views difference as a degeneration from an original model. They also reject the concept of a private, self-determined subject and see chaos and randomness not as irrelevant but vital. Deleuze's philosophy of difference prioritizes the event over structures, assemblages over self-conscious subjects, the ethics of immanent circumstances over transcendent morals, and the virtual and its actualizations over binary oppositions. It embraces an ontology of becoming and difference over being and identity. For Deleuze, thinking isn't about judging from a transcendent model, it's about producing difference through an inventive relationship with chaos, a process they call chaosmosis. Thinking is an inventive act of violence that shatters dominant representational schemes and forces experimentation. Deleuze and Guattari propose three chaoids: art, science, and philosophy, as forms of thought or creation, which are realities produced on planes that cut through chaos. The philosophical invention of a concept in their constructivism involves tracing a plane of immanence and forging conceptual personae, which then create conceptual blocks. This process is triggered by a problem that compels the philosopher to think, opening the philosophical assemblage to chaos. Chaos in this context is the dysfunction or non-relation between undifferentiated terms. Within this dynamic, attractive and repulsive forces reorder the virtual space of ideas, allowing for the creation of melodic relations between terms that didn't previously share the same conceptual orbit. As they state, the plane of immanence is a cut in chaos. Conceptual personae act as intercessors for philosophical invention. These aren't about merely copying ideas, but creating a double or simulacrum.
It's a process of differentiating an idea to serve the specific problem driving the plane of immanence. Concepts gain consistency when these differentiated ideas function inseparably, indiscernibly, and intensively, forming a heterogenesis, an ordering of components through zones of neighborhood or indiscernibility. The example of Descartes' "I think, therefore I am" illustrates this, where doubting, thinking, and being become inseparably linked through zones of indiscernibility.
In summary, Deleuze and Guattari's concept invention is motivated by a regional problem which generates a plane of immanence attracting intercessors. These intercessors are then reconfigured to function collectively, indiscernibly, and indecomposably, leading to the creation of singular relations among terms. This sets the stage for our discussion of how they apply this to Peirce's diagram. Now let's look at how Deleuze and Guattari engaged with Peirce's diagram. As noted, studies by DeLanda, Teso, and Velodi have already explored this connection. DeLanda, for instance, links the diagram to the abstract machine, viewing both as operative functions in the emergence of relations, intensities, and forms. Teso emphasizes the functional equivalence between the diagram and the abstract machine as productive power in art, science, or philosophy. Velodi distinguishes Peirce's diagram as logical constructivism from Deleuze and Guattari's as a generator of intensity and form. Deleuze and Guattari began using the concept of the diagram more consistently from 1,000 Plateaus in 1980, with Peirce as a key intercessor. Their references to Peirce, as pointed out by Cavalcante, largely drew from the 1978 French edition of Écrits sur le signe, which contained primarily texts on semiotics and phenomenology. The article suggests this limited access led to certain misunderstandings. These misunderstandings include a confusion between phenomenology and semiotics, an atypical use of the signifier-signified concept in relation to Peirce, the suppression of the concept of the image as a manifestation of firstness in the classification of hypoicons, and insufficient attention to the recursive nature of Peircean semiotics. The central hypothesis of the article is that these inaccuracies stemmed from the textual limitations of Peirce's work available to Deleuze and Guattari in the 70s and 80s. What if they had access to Peirce's mathematical texts on the diagram? Let's examine some key quotes from Deleuze and Guattari regarding Peirce's diagram. In 1,000 Plateaus, they state that Peirce distinguishes indices, icons, and symbols based on signifier-signified relations, which leads him to classify the diagram as a special type of icon, specifically an icon of relation. However, Deleuze and Guattari propose to redefine these terms based on territorialization and deterritorialization, giving the diagram a distinct role, irreducible to either icon or symbol. Guattari, in Micropolitics, also refers to the diagram as an icon of relation, comparing diagrammatic interactions to mathematical algorithms. He argues these interactions directly engage with realities, producing reference, unlike semiological redundancies, which are mere representations. Later, in Cosmos, Guattari calls for a transformation of Peirce's view. He conceives the diagram as an autopoietic machine which possesses functional and material consistency and unfolds registers of alterity, allowing it to escape an identity restricted to simple structural relations. From these passages, two aspects of the diagram emerge. First, its reduction in Peirce to an icon of relations, and second, its presentation as a virtual space capable of generating abstractions and producing reality,
irreducible to identitarian or representational models. Deleuze and Guattari then sought other intercessors to develop a broader concept of the diagram beyond Peirce's icon of relations. Their expanded view, already present in A Thousand Plateaus, highlights the diagram's importance in the functioning of assemblages. An assemblage for Deleuze and Guattari has four dimensions: expression, content, deterritorialization, and reterritorialization. Expression relates to dominant semiotic regimes, while content refers to the organized machines characterizing the social body of a territory. Deterritorialization is the opening of the assemblage to a chaotic dimension via lines of flight. Here, the abstract machine is responsible for the peaks of deterritorialization. Deleuze and Guattari equate the diagram with the abstract machine as a power of functioning not reducible to stratified content and expression. It's a pure function, not yet actualized in specific form or substance. They further specify the abstract machine's operation through the relationship between diagram and phylum. The diagram acts as pure functions or traits of expression, while the phylum appears as unformed matter or traits of content. This suggests the diagram relates to the virtual and genetic aspects of semiotic expression, and the phylum to the machinic virtuality of content. Reterritorialization, in turn, reorders the territory, which can manifest as negative, relative, or absolute deterritorialization, each involving a specific abstract machine that opens and closes territories. Abstract machines are immanent, agenced, and complex, with different types interacting. There can be poetic abstract machines that blend pure functions, or capitalist abstract machines that absorb revolutionary processes for their own fetishistic operations. Deleuze, in his book on Foucault, also dedicates significant attention to the diagram. Machado, in 2009, summarizes Deleuze's four definitions of the diagram. It's the presentation of force relations, unique to a formation, the distribution of powers to affect and be affected, a mixture of pure unformalized functions and unformed matters, and an emission and distribution of singularities. From these definitions, we can extract three crucial aspects of the diagram: continuity, immanence, and differentiation. The diagram can be captured by stratified spaces, like the space of knowledge with its discursive and non-discursive formations. Yet it also possesses a more flexible dimension, relating to unstable power relations that escape, traverse, and dynamically influence these strata. Diagrams, therefore, immerse themselves in the chaotic outside, selecting traits to produce pure, differentiated functions. They are highly unstable or fluid, constantly mixing matters and functions to constitute mutations. The expanded perspective of the diagram in Deleuze and Guattari can thus be understood through abstraction, continuity, and differentiation. Abstraction is the capacity to transcend dominant semiotic regimes and striated machines. Continuity is the immanent coexistence between form in strata, virtual pure function, and undifferentiated chaos. Differentiation is the power to blend pure functions to produce emerging singularities. Significantly, Deleuze and Guattari themselves in 2007 suggest that mathematical notation comes closest to the diagrammatic power as an autopoietic production of singularity. And in Peirce's philosophical system, mathematics is indeed the most abstract mode of thought, where the diagram is fundamental to its operation. This brings us to the article's core proposal, the schizosemiotic program aimed at updating the notion of the diagram by exploring its mathematical roots and Peirce. According to Santaella in 2004, Peirce's semiotics must be understood recursively within his broader philosophical system, incorporating abstract knowledge like phenomenology and mathematics. Peirce's system, as we discussed, starts with mathematics, the most abstract and fictional of all sciences. Mathematics is concerned with hypothetical deductive thought, not empirical truth. It's an autopoietic power of thought, where the mathematician invents fictions to deduce necessary consequences, much like a poet. For Peirce, the diagram is an autopoietic production of fictions with no pretense of representing an external reality. It involves expressive flows that forge an abstract space for the emergence of singular rationalities. As he stated, mathematical truth is derived from the observation of creations of our own visual imagination, which we can record on paper in the form of diagrams. Mathematical thinking for Peirce is about producing a diagram of possibilities and then deducing necessary consequences. The necessity of the diagram applies only to its fictitious world, not to copying reality, making mathematical reality self-referential. Peirce's mathematical diagram, therefore, aligns closely with Deleuze and Guattari's expanded diagram. This abstract observation in mathematics is itself a producer of reality, and Peirce, like Deleuze and Guattari, emphasizes the inventive activity of the scientist, akin to art. The mathematical diagram provides a plane that allows for ordering and differentiation of ideas through its autopoietic power. It offers not just an abstract space for differentiation, but also a power of continuity and further differentiation. Within Peirce's comprehensive philosophical system, mathematics, and consequently the diagram, permeates all other forms of knowledge, co-functioning and differentiating with the specificity of each science. This means that, for example, in phenomenology, Peirce combines mathematical thought and its diagrammatic processes with the generalized observation of phenomena. It's not just about observing diagrams in self-referential abstract spaces, but making them co-function with real-world phenomena. This mathematical foundation, in turn, underpins the normative sciences, including semiotics. Semiotics, the science of sign action, or semiosis, investigates the continuous process between external affects, dynamic objects, and coupled interpretants through the mediation of the sign. Peirce proposed three fields for semiotics: speculative grammar, critical logic, and speculative rhetoric. It is within speculative grammar that Peirce presents his famous trichotomies in classes of signs, including the division of the icon into image, diagram, and metaphor. Here, the diagram is updated to establish analogical correlations with the internal relations of an object. He described it as preeminently an icon of intelligible relations. Crucially, Deleuze and Guattari encountered the concept of the diagram within this classification of the icon. However, the article argues that before it is an icon of relations, the diagram is the production of an abstract space of intelligibility rooted in mathematics. The mathematical diagram is implicitly present in the semiotic iconic diagram. One must first invent a self-referential expressivity before relating its internal relations to a possible object to produce an icon of relations.
In conclusion, the authors of this article, Diego Frank Marquez Cavalcante, Flavia Cristina Lemos, and Flavio Luis de Castro Freitas, suggest that if Deleuze and Guattari had explored the mathematical foundations of Peirce's diagram, they would have found it far more congruent with their philosophy of difference than the limited icon of relations concept from speculative grammar. The article champions a schizo-semiotic perspective, emphasizing that understanding Peirce's semiotics recursively within his broader philosophical system is key. The abstract aspects of continuity and the self-referential production of differentiation inherent in Peirce's mathematical diagram align sympathetically with Deleuze and Guattari's own expanded notion of the diagram as an abstract machine.
This richer understanding of Peirce's diagram could open new avenues for thinking about the production of difference. The authors plan to expand this debate in future work, connecting the concept of the diagram to ontology in Peirce, Deleuze, and Guattari by coupling it with the notions of ritornello from Deleuze and Guattari and habit from Peirce. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Peirce, Deleuze, and Guattari and the problem of the diagram in the philosophy of difference, from the roots of mathematics of the semiotic diagram from L.A. Deleuziana, Online Journal of Philosophy.